while at the same time feeling really nauseous, feeling like there's this alien inside you from the ayahuasca. And then all of a sudden, my friend starts to scream. And he starts to scream like, ah! Ah! Leo, there's demons around me, man. There's demons around me. And he takes out his lighter and he starts to light these demons that are around him. And I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, what the fuck is this, right? Because I'm high at the same time. So we're all high under this situation. But obviously, you're looking at your friend who's imagining these. Alright, what up? Leonidas here, and it's story time. In this story, I'm going to tell you about my first ayahuasca adventure, my first and only ayahuasca adventure, and why I could potentially not recommend it to you. But of course, if you do decide to go and do ayahuasca, then by all means. So the story begins in 2014. I just came back from a 6-month journey into Southeast Asia, and when I came back, a friend of mine was holding a party. And in this party, there was an acquaintance of ours. And this acquaintance of ours started talking about going to the jungles of Peru to do ayahuasca. Now, before this, I spent about 4 months when I was working as a student in a corporation. And during that time, I would listen to hundreds and hundreds of lectures by Terrence McKenna, as well as a particular video from Joe Rogan talking about the DMT or the ayahuasca trip. So I thought this would be a wonderful experience to finally go out into the wild and test out ayahuasca. So I asked this acquaintance or this mutual friend of mine, what was your experience like? And he basically told me that it's my experience, I can't tell you, but it was my experience. And I said, okay, you know what? Next time you go, let me know, and I am very much down to go with you. And then he said, okay, next time I go, I will let you know. Then I asked him once again, tell me, how was your experience? Like, what did you discover from your ayahuasca trip? And he basically said, I had this experience, I can't really tell you, but next time I go, I will let you know. So about a month and a half goes by, this is the summertime, and he messages me, and he tells me, look, I'm actually going to go to Peru once more to do this ayahuasca thing. And I said, well, that's awesome, like, when are you going? And he said, well, look, I'm actually gonna go in about a week from now. And I said, a week? Well, let me think about it, because this was extremely short notice, right? So, in 1 week, I basically had to plan out whether I was gonna go or not. So I said, okay, I'll let you know in about 24 hours. So 24 hours goes by and I think about everything that I have to do, and luckily my business is online. I was a digital nomad and I still am a digital nomad. So everything that I have to do is basically from a computer, and that's all I need, an internet connection and a computer, and I'm able to work. And I thought to myself, well, everything is running pretty fluidly at the moment, so I guess this would be a pretty good time to go and test out this ayahuasca. So I call him up and I tell him, okay, let me know what I need to buy, tickets, when, where, and how much it's gonna cost and all this stuff, and I am very much willing to go, so let's do this. So he sends me the information, I buy the ticket. So 4 days go by and it's time for our trip. What happens is his mother ends up picking us up, and on the way to the airport, she's driving us, and I could feel this kind of like very negative relationship between his mother and him, but I didn't think much of it, typical family drama, so I just don't think much of it. And we get to the airport, we fly from the airport of Toronto, Canada to the airport of Lima, Peru, and then within Lima, Peru, we take another flight to the city of Iquitos, further in the heart of Peru itself. Now, if you've never heard of Iquitos, Iquitos is the world's largest city with about 500,000 people in it that does not have any major road connections to it. So all the roads are small, there's no major highways leading to it, or you come there by boat along the Rio Negro. So we get to Iquitos and we get into our hostel, and then within our hostel we settle down for the remainder of the day and then into the night. My friend tells me that before we do the ayahuasca, it's best that we avoid eating anything with a high fat content or a high salt content, or avoid eating any meat as well, and avoid doing any drugs or alcohol or having sex, right? So I figure, okay, well, I'm totally fine with all those, no problem, but I don't heed too much into what I'm eating because I still eat whatever was available in Iquitos at the time. So in the hostel itself, there's these very interesting paintings. They very much look like something that's drawn from the experience of a psychedelic trip. There's one painting that has this female grabbing a goblin's hand while a snake goes by, and then there's a couple other very interesting psychedelic photos. While my buddy and I are in the hostel itself, he recommends to me to watch a couple videos to see what the ayahuasca experience is like. But I tell him, you know what, I'm actually not that interested. I'll go with a clear mind and just go in just not expecting anything other than what I had learned about it from Terrence McKenna and the DMT experiences that I read about or heard about. So the night finishes, the morning comes, and then my buddy and I, we get on a small taxi and we head our way down to the port of Iquitos. So we hop on the boat and it takes us down the Rio Negro. So to describe the Rio Negro, it's the river itself is kind of brownish because of all the sediment, and there's jungle, trees, and everything just going by from side to side. After every 30 minutes or so, we would stop off at a small town along the river, and then some people would get off from the boat, some people would get on, and then we would continue down the river to the next town. And then after about, I believe, 3 towns, we finally made it to the town that we were supposed to get to. Now, once we get off the boat, what you can clearly see is that the town recently received cement roads. So I believe this is some kind of political promise, and just recently they received a lamppost. So we get off the boat and then we head into the town, and then we make a right turn. So then as we go down the street, we get to the house of the shaman. My friend has been here before, so he knows where to go. We go up to the shaman, and his house is just a typical cement brick style building, nothing too special, and he's just sitting outside in his chair. And my friend speaks to him. I don't remember if my friend spoke Spanish or not, but at this point in time, we ended up giving the shaman $150 each for 4 nights of an ayahuasca experience, as well as some presents that we bought in the airport before arriving in this town. So it was some chocolate and some cigars that the shaman would essentially enjoy. Obviously, if we did this ayahuasca trip back in the city of Iquitos or even in the city of Lima, then the experience itself would cost much more. But because we're going directly to the shaman, apparently that's why it was much less expensive, plus or minus the cost of the flight and all this other stuff. But anyways, we speak to the shaman and he says, okay, you know what? Come back later this evening and then we'll do the ayahuasca ceremony. So my friend and I leave the shaman's house and then we walk further down into the town. We get this large accommodation built from wood, not cement, and my friend's friend built it previously for the sake of inviting people to do ayahuasca in this village. We get into the accommodations, we settle in, we do a little bit of reading, a little bit of chatting, and then the sunset comes, and then night arrives, and then my friend and I, we leave the accommodations and we head back towards the shaman's house. And we get to the shaman's house, and we don't end up entering his house specifically, but we end up entering the house next to his. And we get inside, and it's this massive enclosure where, if based on this video, it's probably to the end of these cactuses, which are not that far. It's not a large vicinity. And we get inside, and the building itself is just made out of cement, just completely cement, gray cement, and nothing else inside. We go to the center, and in the center of it are these 4 single bed mattresses. Each mattress has its own bowl, and in front of the mattresses and the bowls, there's these 3 chairs. I go to one mattress, my friend goes to another mattress, and then these 2 American guys come inside as well. So one is an African American guy, and another one was this Indian American guy who go to the other 2 mattresses, and we just say hello and what's up. And then the shaman walks in, and the shaman is now carrying a large Coke bottle, and I presume it's the Coke bottle containing the ayahuasca itself. So he comes inside and he's followed by his 2 sons, and he goes and sits down at the chairs. And now I'm sitting on the mattress, my friend's sitting on his mattress, and then the 2 American guys are sitting on their mattresses as well. And now the shaman takes a little aluminum cup, and this is the size of the cup itself, so it's about this dimension, and he takes the Coke bottle and he pours just a little bit of ayahuasca, so just this much of the ayahuasca, and he does a little chant, oh, yo, 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 and he gives it to me. He gives me the ayahuasca, and I smell it, and I'm thinking, wow, this smells terrible. But I'm thinking to myself, all right, this is a ceremony, this is some kind of ritualistic thing. So I think to myself, okay, whatever. And I drink it. And as soon as you drink, it's a disgusting, disgusting taste, like horrendous taste. And what I like to describe it as is if you had poured yourself a cup of orange juice and you left it out in the sun for at least a week until it just becomes to rot. So this is exactly what I just drank, and it goes down. As soon as it starts going down your digestive system, you feel the nausea start to kick in right away, and you're thinking to myself, okay, what did I just drink? This is awful, right? So anyways, I sit back on my mattress going through this nausea process because I just drank this horrendous thing. and my friend gets his cup. So once again, the shaman pours a little bit of ayahuasca for him, does a little chant, gives it to my buddy, and my buddy drinks it as well, sits down on his bed, and the two American guys also drink their ayahuasca and sit down on their beds. Now the shaman turns off the light in the entire compound, and he starts chanting. So it's almost pitch black in the environment, other than when everybody starts lighting up with their cigars and starting to smoke their cigars and doing whatever spiritual things are involved with smoking a cigar. I personally don't smoke, so this was very irritating for me. It was difficult for me to breathe, but whatever, I'm there in the environment, so I'm kind of laying down and trying to breathe as little as they smoke as possible, while at the same time feeling this nausea experience going through the system. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is silly, but whatever, let's go with it. So the shaman's chanting very calmly, and this does kind of calm you down. It kind of calms your nausea, but at the same time you can feel the nausea starting to kick in while everyone is smoking their cigars. And then after about 30 minutes or so, now the ayahuasca starts to come up, and I went to my bowl that was in front of the mattress, and I just start to vomit, and it's just, like, what the hell? Just vomiting into the bowl. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is silly. And then as soon as I finish vomiting into the bowl, I go lay back down, and that's when the ayahuasca experience starts to come in. So what I like to always describe the ayahuasca experience as is a mixture of 4 different compounds. The first one is weed or marijuana. What can happen is you can go into a very introspective state where you're just thinking about things, and these thoughts end up being more interesting than they really are. So your default state of mind is always to think about something. No matter what you're doing, you're always thinking about something. But when you're under the influence of a little bit of weed, these thoughts end up being more interesting than they really are. So you're thinking about the thought, it's like, wow, it's a very interesting thought. But then the next thought pops in, and then you start chasing that thought as well. So you're going through this very introspective state of mind. Then the next compound that I like to compare it to is mushrooms. I've had 2 mushroom experiences in my life prior to ayahuasca, and what I like to describe the mushroom experience as is it opens up your emotional core. So for example, men and women have a very different level of empathy. Men are very much close to thinking about the emotions of others. So therefore, while women, on the other hand, are the more nurturing type, because just biologically they're more the nurturing type, therefore they're able to understand the emotions that someone is feeling more readily than a man. And because of this, that's why we're more likely prone to violence, to aggression, to not care about the other individuals, unlike women who are more likely to be more nurturing towards the emotions of others. So as a man, what it feels like is that you have this wall around your emotional center, around your empathy, but then the mushrooms themselves start to open up and start to put holes into this wall against empathy, right? So you start to feel a little bit more emotional. And the third compound that I described ayahuasca as is alcohol, where in the sense that you start to feel more bravos, you start to feel kind of like lightheaded and inebriated, right? You feel kind of woozy. And the fourth compound that ayahuasca ends up being is a laxative. So you end up vomiting, and then you also, the next day, you end up having this crazy amounts of diarrhea. And in this case, the next day it was green diarrhea. So I'm going through this kind of emotional experience, and what it's bringing to me, the ayahuasca experience, what it's bringing to me is the past 6 months of my Southeast Asia trip. So instead of perceiving it as where I went, what I did, who I met on a very logical kind of level of things that I did, instead it was perceived as how did the people feel during the interaction that I was with them during that experience. So I'm thinking about the Southeast Asia trip and the people that I met, but more from an emotional perspective, more how did it make me feel, more how did the people around me feel at the time, for example. So I'm going through this experience, and while it's interesting at the time, it's nothing revelatory, it's just an interesting experience, while at the same time feeling really nauseous, feeling like there's this alien inside you from the ayahuasca. And then all of a sudden, my friend starts to scream, and he starts to scream like, "Ah! Ah! Leo, there's demons around me, man, there's demons around me." And he takes out his lighter and he starts to light these demons that are around him. And I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, what the f is this, right? Because I'm high at the same time, so we're all high under this situation. But obviously you're looking at your friend who's imagining these demons dancing around him, and he's saying, these demons are laughing at me, they're laughing at me, Leo, like these demons are laughing, they're talking shit about me, Leo? And as this is all happening, the shaman starts to elevate his chanting. So he starts going, ooh, 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 ooh. And you can feel that the chanting of the shaman is very calming. It's a very calming experience. But my friend is still freaking out. So the chanting of the shaman is calming me down, and it's calming down my friend. But then there's these spaces of my friend just freaking the fuck out, right? So my friend's going through this experience and it's just freaking out. The shaman's chanting, everyone's smoking cigars. I'm not smoking, obviously. Everyone else is smoking cigars, and I'm thinking, okay, this is a ridiculous situation, but whatever, go with it. And this continues and proceeds for another about 30 minutes or so, where my friend is freaking out. I'm just thinking, okay, what's going on here? And my friend calms down. The sensation of the ayahuasca starts to calm down as well. And then the experience of that night starts to end. The lights go back on, and then we all end up leaving the vicinity. And as I'm outside, I'm thinking to myself, okay, like my friend just had this experience. While at the same time, I didn't have the experience that I was looking for. What I was expecting from my ayahuasca was to be transported into another dimension, to be speaking with aliens or spirits or a spirit or a god or multiple gods or some kind of lizard species. One of these things that I heard about a lot from Terrence McKenna, but none of this happened. There was no ego dissolving. There was no crazy revelatory experience where I was rocketed out of my body. None of this happened. Instead, I just ended up seeing my friend freak out, and I just vomited. And so the night ends, we go back to the accommodations, the night ends, and we go to sleep. The next day, my friend and I start to walk more around the town, and I start to ask him a little bit more about his personal life. So how he described his situation at the time in his life was that he created a startup with several friends, and this startup gradually started to grow. It started to grow very successfully. But then during the winter months of Toronto, he was driving on the highway at about 100 kilometers an hour, and there was ice on the road, and he crashed into the road and had an accident, and he ended up in the hospital with his leg muscles temporarily destroyed. So what ends up happening while he's in the hospital, his friends come and visit him and tell him, look, we have to kick you out of the company. We just can't keep you around. So this is a very distressful situation. This is a ridiculous situation because you started this company with your friends. And at the same time, he had a very terrible relationship with his father as well, where they actually ended up getting into a fist fight. So this wasn't very conducive to a happy relationship. And his mother, who was apparently divorced at the time, also had a new boyfriend. And this boyfriend also didn't like my friend. So they would also disagree on many things and have these kind of altercations. And this energy of negativity towards him would end up going into the mother. So the mother, when she was driving us to the airport, now I understood that whole situation that was going on, where all this negativity was being bottled up. And what I saw was explaining the manifestations, the projections of these demons that he was seeing, right? So I thought to myself, okay, my friend has issues. Hopefully the ayahuasca will help him fix that. But at the same time, I want a deeper, more profound ayahuasca experience myself. So the night comes and we go back to the shaman's place. And the shaman's place, once again, has the 4 mattresses, the 4 bowls, and this time it has 4 chairs. And I asked one of the American guys to tell the shaman to give me more ayahuasca, because the first time I didn't get the experience that I wanted. So this time I want more ayahuasca. And the guy translates, and the shaman, instead of pouring me a little bit of ayahuasca this night, he ends up pouring me the entire cup. And he goes, once again, blows onto the cup of ayahuasca and gives it to me. And once again, I smell it. I'm thinking, wow, this is terrible. And I think, okay, you know what? Whatever transports me into another dimension. And I drink the entire cup of ayahuasca. And once again, it feels this awful, terrible, disgusting taste. And now I have a full cup of it going down, and it feels like this alien just going inside your body, but obviously it's just something terrible that you shouldn't be drinking, like rancid milk. So I'm drinking it, and it's going down. Now it's just kind of moving through my stomach. I sit back on the mattress. My friend drinks his ayahuasca. The 2 American guys drink their ayahuasca. The lights go off, and everyone starts smoking their cigars once again. But this night, what happened was, next to the building that we were drinking the ayahuasca, just about 2 buildings over, there was a bar, like a bar in this town in the jungle, that started playing music, and you could clearly hear it. So if you've ever done any sort of psychedelics, you know that set and setting are super important. So the set is where you are, and the setting is what's happening around you. So the set, okay, I'm in this kind of cement building, but the setting is music playing in the background while everyone's smoking their cigars, and at the same time there's mosquitoes flying all around us because we're in the jungle. So once again, this disgusting feeling inside my stomach, going through it, nausea, feeling very sick, and then once again, now it's time to vomit. The shaman is chanting, "Oy, oy, oy." I go to my bowl and I start projectile vomiting, much harder than I did the day before because I had much more of the ayahuasca. and I start vomiting. And at this point, I have this out-of-body experience where as I'm vomiting, I kind of levitate outside of my body, and then I start to imagine that I'm looking down at this person who's vomiting, and this person who's vomiting is actually some kind of alien lizard species that's realized that in order for it to discover something revolutionary or discover something that is interesting about life or discover its inner being, it has to drink some kind of disgusting liquid and then to vomit its guts out in order to receive the revelation that it is looking for. And I think when I'm looking down at this lizard, which is obviously myself, I'm thinking this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen or done, because you have to vomit in order to get to another dimension or whatever. But okay, whatever. I get back into my body and I lay down and once again start having these thinking thoughts mixed in with the mushroom emotional thoughts, mixed in with the inebriation. And at this point, my friend starts to freak the out again, like, Leo, there's demons, Leo, you have to help me. And I'm once again looking over at him, and he's taking out his lighter and trying to light the demons, like trying to light them on fire. They're laughing at me, Leo, they're laughing at me. And the shaman is chanting, ooh, 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 trying to calm everyone down. And you can clearly feel that the chanting of the shaman does calm you down. His tonality, his vocals, the pitch, the speed, everything is just calming you down. But you can clearly see that my friend is going crazy. So it does calm him down, but then he resorts to the psychotic situation, the psychotic breakdown. So my friend's going around everywhere and trying to light these demons. And at this point, I'm thinking to myself, okay, you know what? Let me try to calm him down. So I take my hand and I put it on his shoulder and I tell him, dude, calm down, everything's okay. And one of the American guys tells me, dude, don't touch him, because it's going to transport the energy from him to you. 80% of me is thinking to myself, okay, this is probably total BS, total bullshit. But there's that 20% that's currently under the influence of ayahuasca that's thinking into itself that, okay, maybe it's true. You want to hedge your risks by taking your hand off his shoulder, but 80% of me is thinking, okay, this is just ridiculous. So anyways, my friend is still going around trying to light these demons, and they're laughing at me, Leo, they're laughing at me, The shaman is chanting, it's obviously calming us down. And out of nowhere, the other American guy just yells at my friend, dude, shut the f up. And at this point, my friend calms down and he goes into a silence as the shaman keeps chanting. And my friend walks over to beside the shaman and he sits down in the fourth chair and he continues kind of lighting the demons and smoking his cigar, lighting the demons, while in the background the bar is still playing the music while the mosquitoes are still hovering around. And eventually the ayahuasca effect goes away, starts to cool down. Now the ayahuasca trip is essentially over. So lights go back on. We leave the compound, and as we go outside, we have a little chat with the two American guys and myself and my buddy. And as I look up into the sky, this is the first time that I've ever seen in my life the Milky Way galaxy. All right, so it had the purples and the blues, and it was very, very vivid because we're in the jungle and there's not much light. There's not much anything else. And I guess also because we're much closer to the equator, it was much more visible. So my friend and I were walking back to our accommodations at nighttime, and I tell him, look, you know what? I didn't get the experience that I wanted. I'm actually going to go outside and just enjoy the galaxy. So we get back into the accommodations, and I start getting myself ready to cover myself with mosquito netting and to put a little headlamp on. And my friend says, dude, you can't go outside, man. There's evil shamans outside. They're going to cast evil magic on you. You just can't go. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Don't tell him that he's wrong, because at this point he probably believes it, right? You can't tell a religious person that their religious ideas are not true. Like you can't tell a Hindu that Shiva or Brahma are not real, or you can't tell that Jesus didn't actually have superpowers, because they believe it. So my friend was believing that there's shamans in the village that are going to cast evil magic. So I said to him, dude, you know what? Leave me alone. I didn't have the experience that I wanted. I just want to go out and experience what is available to me because didn't get what I wanted. And he says, no, dude, you can't go. And I said, dude, just leave me alone, okay? So I go to my shoes next to the door, and as I'm trying to get my shoes, there's this giant spider just next to my shoes, right? And this obviously wasn't an imagination because I do have a photo of this. And I look at the spider and I tell him, okay, Henry, I understand what you're trying to do. And what you're trying to do is actually a bad idea. You do understand this, because if you do what you are trying to do, it's not going to be good for me. And there's no one in this village that's going to be able to save me. All right, Henry? So please do not do what you're trying to do and stay away from my bed and my shoes, please. And of course, Henry is a spider, so spiders don't talk. So whatever, Henry just stood there. I take my shoes, I put them on, I cover myself with mosquito netting, and I go out and sit in front of our accommodations in the middle of these like grassy patchlands that are in front of our accommodations, right? And I'm just looking at the galaxy. And as I'm looking at the galaxy, a couple dogs are looking at me. You can see the reflection from their eyes of the moon. Then a couple buffaloes start walking past me. I sit there, kind of enjoy the experience a little bit. Then I go back into our accommodations, and my friend looks at me, and I said, okay, you know what? Time for bed and time for sleep. The next day comes, and at this point I think to myself, okay, you know what? I'm probably gonna avoid the ayahuasca because I really don't want to, number one, listen to music. Number two, breathe in smoke from cigars. Number three, be bitten by mosquitoes all night. Number four is to drink this thing that just makes me nauseous and makes me vomit, and then watch my buddy go into a psychotic breakdown every time. So I tell my buddy, okay, you know what? Later on tonight, I'm gonna go with you, and I'm gonna wait for you to drink the ayahuasca, but I'm not gonna stay. I'm just gonna go back to the accommodations, and I'm gonna wait for you to come back, and that's pretty much it. So the night comes. That's exactly how it plays out. We go to the accommodations. I sit on my mattress. I tell the shaman I don't want any more ayahuasca. I'm just gonna wait for my friend to drink his ayahuasca. And then once they started to drink, I said, okay, I'm gonna go now. I left. And in the accommodations, I started just reading my book about DMT, or the serpent molecule, or whatever it is about ayahuasca. And then after about an hour and a half, my friend comes back, and I asked him, how was your experience? And he said, it was fine. So I don't end up asking more because I pretty much know what he's trying to figure out. I pretty much understand what his experience could have been like. And time for bed. The next day comes, and this is the final day that we're in Peru. And I think to myself, okay, look, I came all this way from Toronto to Peru. I spent $2,000 for the flight, the accommodations, paying the shaman, all this stuff to get to Peru, right? And there's also the opportunity cost of anything that happened with my business at the time. So I think to myself, this time I'm gonna control the set and setting as much as I can. So the night comes, and we go to the shaman's house. And once again, there's the 4 mattresses, the 4 bowls, and the 4 chairs. But before the night came, I asked the shaman to ask the bar that was very close to us to not play their music that night. So at that night, there was no more music playing. But when I came, I arrived with several things. I arrived with full mosquito netting for myself to cover myself up. And I also arrived with earplugs. So the shaman pours me a cup of ayahuasca. I drink it. Once again, is this disgusting taste that makes you wanna puke, makes you wanna vomit. And this time, instead of sitting on the mattress, I actually just grab a chair, put it into the very corner of the building, and sit there, completely covered, completely oblivious to the sound. I couldn't really hear anything anymore, and lights are off. And I cover my eyes with, I believe it was a sleeping mask. I'm sitting there, just kind of in my own reality, just feeling the nausea, just this disgusting feeling inside your stomach. And then after about 25 minutes, 30 minutes, it's time to vomit again, but I just didn't know where my bowl was. So in this case, I got up and I walked to another end of the building trying to find a toilet or something. And I find the toilet inside the building, and as I enter it, I turn on my headlamp, and everything is just covered with spider webs. Everything is just covered with spider webs. And I'm obviously not hallucinating this because I can see this. And with the shadow that the light is giving to the spiders look huge, right? enormous spiders all around this toilet. So I think to myself, okay, well, I still have to vomit, so whatever, YOLO. So I kind of maneuver myself in there, and I vomit into the toilet. And I didn't end up flushing the toilet because behind it was covered in spiderweb. You just couldn't enter it without touching the spiderweb or getting some spiders on you. So I think to myself, okay, I vomited, and now it's time to go back into the facility where everyone is on their mattress. And as I go back to where everyone is sitting, I think to myself, you know what? I don't want to actually stay there. I don't want to be in this environment. I would prefer to actually experience ayahuasca from a more nature perspective. So I decide to myself, you know what? Let me go outside. Instead of sitting in this cement brick. I walk outside, and I stand in the middle of the road in this village. And as I'm standing in the middle of the road, just looking around, listening to the ruminations of the mind, from the distance, I can see 3 dogs looking at me. And I can see a little bit of the reflection on their eyes, and they're looking at me, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is not a good situation. These dogs may be dangerous or wild. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, how do I scare dogs? And I think to myself, well, how do you scare a bear? You basically have to look bigger than the bear. So what I end up doing is I end up just putting up my hands to end up looking bigger than the dogs. And the dogs end up looking side to side, and they just say, all right, whatever, and they just leave. Obviously, they're not speaking, but they just end up leaving. But what happens next is that what your body does, your mind follows. So as my hands are still up, what ended up happening is your body starts to pump itself full of dopamine, full of feel-good hormones, a little bit of adrenaline, right? So that's why when you're in in a nightclub or in an electro festival, they always say, put your hands up. This actually ends up elevating your feel-good hormones, right? And actually it's a fight or flight experience as well, because you're potentially going to fight off an enemy, right? So you're putting your hands up in a response to go into a fight or flight mode. And as this happens, I start to get this thought process going in, and I start getting this idea flowing through my head, and it starts to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And then I ended up getting the meaning of life. Literally the meaning of life. It was very strong at the time. It was very pivotal at the time. And the meaning of life that I got at that very moment was whatever you want it to be. The meaning of life is whatever you want it to be. Anything you want it to be. You can literally program your mind, you can program your subconscious to have whatever meaning it is you need in life, right? So I'll explain this a little bit later. Anyways, one of the American guys comes outside to just check up on me, to just check that everything's fine. I tell him, yeah, everything's cool, everything's fine. He goes back inside, the night ends, and I don't believe my friend had his psychotic breakdown once more, but once again, we leave the facility, we go back to our accommodations, the night ends, time for bed. Wake up in the morning, we get to the port, I make the small video. So it's basically my experience from that very moment, or a very fresh experience that I had at the time. And we get back on the boat, we head back to Iquitos, and from Iquitos we get to Lima, and then from Lima we return to Toronto. So there were several takeaways that I received from this ayahuasca experience. Number one, probably not going to do ayahuasca again. I just thought it was a waste of time. Ultimately, you're projecting whatever inner reality that you have, and it could help with some issues that some people might have. But in my particular case, I didn't receive the experience that I wanted, which was to be transported into interdimensional experience, to speak with aliens, to see something that was very vivid, very interesting, very interdimensional. It just didn't happen. All I saw was myself vomit, my friend go through a psychotic breakdown, and the setting itself, it wasn't very good for doing ayahuasca, to say the least. So how I see the ayahuasca experience is that you are physically, through the process of the ayahuasca vomiting, through the process of the hallucinations, you have these thought processes, right? And let's say some of the thought processes are traumatic situations that you've had in your life. So my friend had the car accident and he got kicked out of his startup, and then he had the bad situations within his family, with his father, with his mother. So what you're doing is you have this memory and you have this very bad emotional context to it, right? So by vomiting, you end up putting yourself in a situation that feels really terrible, but at the same time, what ends up happening is that your body starts to pump itself full of endorphins and feel-good hormones. So, for example, dopamine or adrenaline, and then you're detaching the feel-bad emotion, and instead you're attaching the endorphin emotion, which is the feel-good, to the same exact thought. So it's kind of resetting the emotion of all the thoughts or all the traumas that you might have had in your life. There are societies, or there are groups or communities or cults that actually end up doing this kind of stuff, where they completely berate someone or they completely talk down someone to completely destroying their emotional well-being, and then they build them right back up. This is something that's done in certain cults or certain communities or certain self-development gurus. But for the most part, with ayahuasca, this is a similar situation that you're having. You're resetting yourself using the chemical process of the ayahuasca. You're resetting the traumas that you've experienced in life through ayahuasca by vomiting and then getting pumped full of feel-good hormones on the negative thoughts that you might be having. The second thing is that ayahuasca has DMT in it. So dimethyltryptamine is the most psychedelic compound known to humans. When you smoke it, or when you inject it, or when you consume it, when you eat it, using a certain inhibitor for your stomach, you are transported from yourself, your ego, into another dimension. I've done DMT several times. I've never had this experience yet, probably because I'm not doing DMT properly, but this is technically what should be happening with DMT. I thought ayahuasca would give me the same experience. Unfortunately, this wasn't the case. And ultimately, would I do ayahuasca again? Probably not. Very, very unlikely. I don't want to vomit. If I wanted to, I could just get DMT directly. It's a much more direct compound to get into the situation that I want. There's not necessarily any post-traumatic stress disorders that I have. And also, I saw an episode on Netflix where certain people were taking ayahuasca regularly, where some people actually had about 60 experiences with ayahuasca to recover from post-traumatic stress disorders or some kind of issues in their life or some kind of health issue, and yet they're not necessarily fully recovered. They're not even close to being fully recovered. So I'm not sure if ayahuasca actually solves any of these issues. And on top of that, I clearly saw what was happening during ayahuasca with my friend, where he was simply projecting his inner demons literally into the world. Anyways, that was my ayahuasca experience. Would I recommend it? Sure. If you want to try it, by all means. I mean, everyone is going to have their own experience. My experience ultimately was much more logical. You know, it's just an experience of weed with shrooms, with a little bit of alcohol, with a laxative, and ultimately you're just resetting your state of mind a little bit, supposedly, with some new feel-good emotions from your natural body chemicals. Is it necessary? Highly unlikely. Is it going to be effective? Like I said, yes, maybe no. I'm going to say probabilistically not. Have certain people had a revolutionary, life-changing experience? Certainly. Can you get that from other compounds, such as mushrooms or LSD? Most definitely. Do you need to go to the Amazons of Peru or Brazil or Venezuela? Highly unlikely, but to each their own. Go for the experience, and I hope you enjoyed that video. Once again, Leonidas here. Have you had an ayahuasca experience? If you have, feel free to share it. I would love to hear what other people have had with their ayahuasca experiences, and I will see you in the next video where I will share another story. Salute.
All right, what up? It's Leonidas here, coming in from Herrera, Peru, really small town just along the Amazon. And we just finished 4 days of ayahuasca tripping. I only did 3 days, of course, because on the third day, I didn't find any use for it. So things I discovered, nothing really, other than a little bit of euphoria, a little bit of self-awareness, growth. And most of what I discovered was just be objective and have objective reasoning when you experience these things. Ultimately, I'd like to try the actual active components of ayahuasca, which is dimethyltryptamine, and you can do that through smoking it, which will give you the same hallucinogenic effects without the nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea induced by ayahuasca. Now, of course, the ayahuasca is a really old tradition. It was invented in ancient times, but of course, just like the Bible, doesn't necessarily mean it's of any use these days. Nonetheless, interesting experience. Got to live in a third world town without any internet for a little bit. And the experience was really cool. We're surrounded by the Amazon here. We're surrounded by the, We're surrounded by the ukulele. We're surrounded by the...
ukulele. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It flows into the Amazon, and ukulele and Parañón together from the Amazon River.
How was your adventure?
Lecture was good. I just needed to get away for a bit, clear my head. I learned that still teaches you. I think my friend Leo here learned something, although he might not realize it yet. And I think it was very useful for both of us. Not gonna try DMT, at least not in a while. Fun adventure.
And in case the viewers are wondering what DMT is, it's the actual active compound that involves dreaming. So it's a natural occurring compound in your brain, unlike LSD, which is synthetic. And apparently, DMT, psilocybin, and serotonin all look the same as a molecule. So therefore, that's what that makes you hallucinate. So they all make you hallucinate in the same molecular compound. But LSD, on the other hand, is synthetic and looks nothing like serotonin. So scientists were trying to discover why it made people hallucinate. Nonetheless, get some of that DMT, get the actual trip that you wanted to, and yeah, see some snakes or some hallucinogenic, maybe intergalactic travel. All right, Leonidas 2014, cool, still safe and sound. Some more hallucinogenic trips in the future. Cheers.